So we're going to
Go to the panelists now and let each of them have up to, but you don't have to take, 10 minutes apiece, and then we'll start to get into your questions. So we'll start with Andrew Christie from the Sierra Club.
Am I live?
Yes.
Oh, good. Yeah, I never get the position I want on these panels. I always want to be at the very end so I can actually say, okay, you've heard everything and every detailed shoot over about this ordinance. Now here's what we're really talking about. But the reason why the Sierra Club is involved in this issue and is supporting the Ag Tourism Coalition is because we're very much interested in the protection and preservation of ag land. So when we did this panel, most of us in Paso about a month ago, we had a very high proportion of the ag end of that equation in the audience, and I think today we have a very high proportion of the tourism end in the audience. So I'm still going to be talking mostly about ag, so some of that may not be terribly pertinent to some of you. But basically, as far as the ordinance itself goes, and as far as the Sierra Club is concerned, as an organization, as it affects us, it makes the process of getting a minor use permit cheaper and simpler and easier. So we really can't find a way to object to it from the standpoint of a nonprofit doing its daily business. But the ordinance itself, or rather the impetus behind the ordinance, what it represents, we feel, is not so much, the obvious ostensible concentration on holding events on ag land and what kind and where, which is important, but the underlying question of how do I make my land pay? This is what the growers and the ranchers, people in ag zone land, are looking to try to do by holding events on their land. And of course, the other side of that is how do I make my land pay and avoid the resource impacts and the threat of substantially changing the rural character of the area, which is the very serious concern of the planning staff, the ag commissioner, and us. So what I generally talk about instead of the ordinance is what the policies we should have in place, should be doing, whether or not we had the Ag Events Ordinance in place. And those policies that answer the question, how do I make my land pay, should start with the county adopting something like a local food purchase policy and an ag conversion policy. And those were basically the subject of a 5-part series of articles that our executive committee published in New Times at the end of last year and early this year. We hope to be discussing that at greater length with some supervisors in the near future. Right now, let's just say that this would be part of a farmland protection program that combines substantial financial incentives to landowners with effective land use regulation. The American Farmland Trust says we all know we need our farms for the food and fiber they grow. But now, in addition, it's becoming clear that our farms can also provide critical environmental services like sequestering carbon, filtering water, and providing wildlife habitat. So it's not a choice. Saving economically viable farms and securing their help in maintaining environmental quality for our communities are both vital to the survival of countless species as well as to our health, economy, and quality of life, end quote. And I don't bring that up because the American Farmland Trust is suggesting that out of the goodness of their hearts, farmers should make their land available for these wonderful environmental services. They're talking about new markets. Agriculture contributes a rather small share of the nation's greenhouse gas emissions. It's about 7% of the total. But it also helps remove carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, sequestering it in plants and soil. In emerging carbon trading markets, farmers and ranchers are being paid for adopting practices that reduce greenhouse gases, such as grass and tree plantings, conservation tillage, and producing low-carbon renewable energy. Another aspect of making the land pay that we should have is our own full-scale farm-to-school program in SLO County. And that means the county should be doing more about that than what the county usually does, which is stand back and say, hey, it's schools, we're the county, we have nothing to do with that. The county should support local purchasing, working with farmers to improve their ability to provide food to schools. This really is potentially the silver bullet. With the school districts as major purchasers, farmers would have significant incentive to expand existing operations. We would actually see new farms. We wouldn't necessarily have to keep having the same argument about how do we save the remnants.
I cannot hear you.
Testing. Any better?
Little.
Wow.
Not much.
Can you turn up the mic, maybe?
Turn up the mic.
That's what I'm doing. It's
Farm workers can't hear.
almost up to 11.
I think it's
You have to boom out a little.
Just have to project.
But farm to school, helping with local production, would actually see new farms, opportunities for service providers like processors and distributors that aren't there now. Helping small farmers get access to processing facilities is a major part of that program, and of course that would help with everything else in addition to farm to school. Let's pass these policies and bring locally grown food into county-run operations. And again, this helps us to meet our strategic growth policies, our obligation to cut greenhouse gas emissions. It transports food a shorter distance, cuts the fuel needed to ship it, the energy needed to cool it, packaging to transport it, and cuts carbon emissions. Finally, agricultural conservation easements are the guaranteed gold plate how to keep ag land in agriculture. They can cover an entire parcel or a portion. The farmer doesn't have to keep farming. He just agrees to keep all or some of his land in a condition where farming could resume at some point in the future. And other farmers know that the critical land mass is there to maintain a local farming economy in the future. An ag and open space conservation district would make that happen, and it's been very encouraging to see the local interest in this idea, much of it from the ranching community. And that's basically a roster, a menu of some of the things that we could put in place now to increase the viability of ag land. The Ag Events Ordinance is simply a way to simplify what we have now, to put some rules in place for what we have now, and to make place that we still have the thing that makes people want to come here, the tourism, the golden goose, which is our agriculturally productive land. Thank you.
Let me introduce Jackie Crabb and just encourage, because I have this problem myself and up there, to project as much as you possibly can. You're all very polite, soft-spoken folks, and some of the folks in the back of the room need to hear you. So the acoustics are the best here always. We struggle with it a little bit. So let me introduce Jackie Crabb from the Farm Bureau.
Okay, I'll give this a go. Do you hear me? Okay. Okay, I'd like to start first in regards to this ordinance, that one of the biggest concerns we have and should be looked at first of all is the legislative intent. And the legislative intent was never in the draft that went before the Planning Commission. It was put together by the subcommittee and with some help from the Ag Tourism Coalition. But if you look at that, it sets a negative tone. It does not emphasize the economic benefits that comes to this county, and that it was expanded on when it went to the Ag Tourism Coalition. It's in their draft. And we stress that this is not the same content of what was in the planning staff's draft. We require or request that this be taken back and looked at, and that we get back to the original authorization from the Board of Supervisors. So that's the first step. But keep in mind that Farm Bureau supports the ag tourism and direct marketing. We see that there's an economic diversification benefit to our farmers and ranchers. It's a way for visitors to enjoy and experience the life on the farm. And we also want to be able to protect our ag resources and the rural character. But we need to have reasonable regulations to do this. First, I want to talk about the ag events. We all are in agreement on the ag events. There is no dispute there. As far as we see it, it's great. It's a lesser permit, which means lesser in cost. I'm sure Kim will speak on this and stress that this is the plus that comes out of this ordinance. We have no qualms with that. And keep in mind, though, we are speaking of other concerns that we'd like to be discussed today. But we do have one problem with the Ag Tourism Coalition draft that was just approved at the last Planning Commission. In the ag event, there was in the definition the ability for the farmer and rancher to educate the public about on-site ag or natural resources. They have removed this from the definition, and it's now only allowed by the nonprofits under the public benefit and education. This was brought up at the December meeting with Commissioner Rappa did address this. However, the staff, or ATC has kept it off. Planning staff kept it in. Another disagreement on the contents of the two drafts. The biggest one is the special events, which we're going to continue to call special events. They're calling it commercial events. In the wineries, they call them special events. Right now, you can have a special event. That would include the weddings on ag lands. You have a minor use permit requirement. But what the debate is over the definition of secondary and incidental, which is in our ag policy.